My name is Joel Buckowitz. I'm the owner and operator of Cut Brooklyn, a small shop here in Gowanus, Brooklyn, where we make handmade knives for home and professional cooks. I lived in Brooklyn and I went to graduate school at New School University. I got an MFA in fiction writing. I had a really hard time selling the first manuscript that I wrote. When that sort of went sour and I couldn't sell my book, I just kind of lost steam altogether. I had this period of fear that I was really going to lose writing. It was this thing that I really loved, and I was afraid that I was just going to lose it forever. I decided to take a 3-month hiatus from it, just stop altogether. And when I stopped, I found that I developed this need to make these sort of creative offerings on a daily basis, to basically make things. When I recognized this need, I started just making stuff. A set of bookshelves, a set of canoe paddles for my dad, jewelry, tables, various things. Whenever there was an occasion, I would just go, oh, I'll make something for that, or I'll fix this at the house. And that was kind of filling that need for me. At some point, I just sort of had the idea, and I'd always kind of had a fascination with knives, that it would be fun to try. So I tried it out, and it just really resonated with me. It just sort of rung in me the idea of making something so basic and simple when I'd been working on projects that were so very abstract that would never see the light of day. And that this thing that I made would be useful, would be inherently useful, and would be around forever, and somebody would find it someday and be like, wow, I can use this thing. So in a creative way, it was very much the opposite of what I was doing. The payoff was just massive, and so I was just hooked. We had this dilapidated garden shed behind our house. When I wasn't making money, cutting wood or doing various jobs, I was in there just pushing, just like hooked. I just got good at it. I found that I had a talent for it, and I got good really fast. So I was selling knives, within 3-4 months of making my first. These were sort of sporting type knives, so hunting knives, these kinds of things. All of a sudden, I was on a year wait like that. People were waiting for my work, and I thought, man, maybe I could do this. And this is one of the things that really appealed to me, was that it didn't cost me a lot to sort of get into this. It just took time. And when I had this break from writing, that's like what I had. So you go into the shop and, you cut yourself, you burn yourself, you fuck stuff up, you ruin something you've worked on for 3 weeks, and you never make that mistake again. So this is how I learned. And so those things are the same with writing and knife making. It just takes, buckets of blood and sweat and fucking work to get there. That's it, to get good, to get competent. And then once you become competent, maybe you have it in you to become an artist. Maybe you don't. Before you get to a place where you can actually make art with the skills that you learn, you have to sort of master these basics. Mastering the basics takes, they say 10,000 hours. It's like 5 years of 40-hour weeks. I'd say it's probably more like 15,000 hours. So it takes a lot of work to get there. And then when you get there, that's day one, Then you can start and you can be making something that you can maybe call art. When you build a knife, it's a purpose-built tool. Really, in reality, the knives that I was making, people would buy and they would just sit in a cabinet somewhere and never be used for the purpose they were made for. It just short-circuited the entire creative process for me. So I was in this spot where it was kind of like, can I make this work? Will it work? Do I want it to work? So I thought, this is probably not gonna work. What might work, though, is a kitchen line, because there's so many chefs in New York, A. B, I thought, super easy to grind and make a kitchen knife. It's gotta be the easiest thing in the world. And people will buy them. It'll be fantastic. It turned out, just from the sort of design point of view and actually making a good kitchen knife, that was really hard. There's 5 lines to every kitchen knife. If you don't get them just right, it's gonna be a piece of shit. As I was designing, it took me well over a year and a half. It was like 2 years before I had a piece that I was like, there it is, that's it right there. The difference between my knife that spends 15 hours, say, in my hands all the way through the process, and a knife that gets made in Germany by like 10 different robots over like a 15-minute period is all really in the details. There needs to be a human element in the making of these things. My sort of flat-out mission statement with what I do is to make every single knife that I make the very best knife that I've ever made. I just was hoping that I could make a living one way or another. I had no idea that there was this sort of food scene that was just popping off, and no idea that folks would even respond. I was worried that people would shun me because I was making knives. I set up shop and I just started working and working. It was an awesome place. I've never worked in a studio environment before, but it was a whole floor full of 20 studios, and it was filled with people just doing shit that they love to do. You'd go to get a glass of water and there'd be somebody stumbling out of their studio with like dust behind them, like making something. And to me, that was like a whole new thing. I didn't sort of realize that I could have a community like that. I'd been really sheltered. I feel like I just came down from like the hills, and like landed in this spot where all these people were just doing stuff that they were just pumped to do. They were like sacrificing their time, their money, to just push into whatever their endeavor was. And it was like people just looking to make their sort of dreams become things and alive. That first community to me was just like electric. I was like, oh my God, it was like somebody turned the lights on. It took a little while, it took a few months, but the food world started calling and I started to meet chefs and people interested in. The photographer for Edible Brooklyn, Michael Harlan Turkel, shot some stuff at my shop. He was like, this seems really neat what you're doing. Let me introduce you to some people. He introduced me to the folks up at the Brooklyn Kitchen, some butchers around the city. He sort of opened my eyes to this community and sort of introduced me to this community. From then it just sort of snowballed. So this food world sort of unveiled itself before me. And all of a sudden I was like a part of it, and I was a part of something. What's happening in food in Brooklyn is more than even just a community. There's a little bit of a movement here. Several things are sort of coming together at one time. There's like a consumership that's willing to sort of be educated and educate itself about food, about sort of products and these kinds of things. There's also lots of people doing lots of great handmade stuff, like dreaming things and making them happen. So I'm at the convergence of like this handmade and this food world. It's like I hit the jackpot. I hit the lottery. There are like 4 or 5 guys in the country that make handmade kitchen knives. So it was this weirdly like wide open market. I think probably some folks getting into it just sort of think that there's this, great opportunity. It's like, the streets are paved with gold in the handmade world. And that's like, couldn't be farther from the truth. Where the currency is really rich is in community, is in the friendships you develop, the fact that you get to do what you want to do and for the most part not be bossed around. That's where it's like rich. It's like in quality of life, it's rich. This tag, handmade, on its very sort of basic face value, means quality. If it's made by hand, it's made with great quality. Like when you think of a handmade suit, you think of something that's like perfect. That's why you pay more for it. Or a handmade car. To me, that's the sort of the value of handmade. Really, the root of this is that people are getting excited about doing this kind of work. So we're seeing folks just sort of getting started, So if there's a movement, it's in the future. 5 years from now, handmade in Brooklyn is gonna mean something serious, I think.